Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Hi, my name's Ed Bicknell, and I'm Promoter 101, and I'm in room 24 something, and I've got an inside leg measurement of 32 inches and a cup size of 31A.
It's the notorious JEW, and you're tuned into Promoter 101, episode 32. Drop a mad beat, MC Pierce.
And I'm Luke Pierce, and you have lucked into an amazing show this week. We have Partisan Arts Tom Chauncey, writer Larry LeBlanc, Boston Calling's Trevor Solomon, plus Lisa Robert plays 3 questions, and Billboard's Dave Brooks breaks some news.
Hello, this is Sarah Mertz.
Rick Barrow.
Nick Light.
Mark Geiger.
This is Lee Anderson.
Kevin Lyman.
John Giddings.
Jim Runge. Jeff White.
Brian Zisk.
Chuck Randall.
Brian O'Connell.
Andrea Johnson.
Adam Parsons.
Ariel Hyatt.
Ben Mensch.
Jamie Miller.
Billy Wayne Davis.
Brandon Frankel.
Mitch LaFont.
Jake Gould. Gary Smith. Jeff Cohen.
You are on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
We're going to be doing Promoter 101 live in a few places here. We got tour dates for this fall, including Seattle, which is confirmed for September 7th. Boston's going to get a visit on October 12th. And Nashville, we're coming for you the following week. Stay tuned for some details.
If you want us to come to your town, feel free to ask your university bookers, the conference organizers, to bring Promoter 101 podcast to your town for a live taping, or email us at steiny@promoter101.net.
Hi, it's Paula Palazzo from Live Nation Concerts Canada, and I'm on Promoter 101.
We got some birthdays coming up this week, Dan.
On Monday, Paradigm's Todd Walker turns 42 years old.
On Tuesday, we're wishing a happy birthday to Lisa Martin Roberts, our buddy at APA, Luke Cahill, Lori Louie, Bart Dahl, Jake Kennedy, and manager Mark Denby.
Wednesday, Colin Johnson. Happy birthday, buddy.
On Thursday, a happy birthday to Shelley Bowers and WME's Braden Roundtree.
On Friday, the Franks brothers Charlie Goldstone, Paradigm's Clint Wiley, and Greg Siegel.
Big ups to Clint on Friday. Got to send him a card. On Sunday, we're going to round out the week with happy birthdays to Chuck LaValle and Medina Salati. Happy birthday, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
This is Ariel Hyatt from Cyber PR on the Promoter 101 podcast.
We're often asked how the podcasts work. This week, we'll take a minute and give you a little behind the scenes of Promoter 101.
Every episode of Promoter 101 starts with the interview guest who's available and willing to talk to us that our listeners are hopefully going to find interesting. Keeping in mind, it's not enough for someone just to be willing to do the show. They have to be available to us in a timely manner, too.
Once we record the interview, we have our engineer, Evan Friday, work on cleaning up the audio, sound levels, mumbles, remove questions that might not fully have gotten answered, and stories that don't seem to fit with the tone of the interview. General editing.
Our podcast gets released on Monday morning, so earlier in the week after our podcast has come out for the previous week, we'll start to outline the show in a Google Doc. Dan and I start to put topics in we want to cover into that file, and Dan starts to cultivate what guests he wants to match up for the week.
The hope is to find people from different parts of the industry, not only by the job, but the territory. So we don't necessarily have a week of all Canadian artists or a week of all concert promoters. That we have maybe a ticketing executive from the States on top of a promoter from the UK and an agent from South America, showcasing different views of the industry from different people.
And then once we get those guests locked up, Dan builds a weekly rundown for Evan to see what interviews and what promos are going to be needed. So on top of that, we start to lock in some contributors for the week and set up recording times for people. That's people like Dave Ratner. Scott Perry drops in to do some tech. We have Debbie Starr come in to do some stuff. Dave Brooks from Billboard. Those are our general friends of the podcast we invite on to contribute in a specific area of the podcast.
We also start to lock in special extras. These are the segments that we do, like 3 questions or special features that have to do with something going on in the industry that we want to talk about in depth.
As the week comes to a close, we start to gather Dan's Promoter 101 tweets from his account in the past week, as well as the news, and then we trade some emails about where we both fall on particular issues of the week.
As I'm sure you can tell, Luke and I are very close friends and have a lot of the same views. However, we come from different genres and different points of view in the industry, so we have different experiences, and that can bring up some heated debates from time to time.
Makes for a decent podcast. On Friday morning, we both try to do some polishing on the script, and then later in the afternoon, we record. That's the intros, news, and other segments.
Our engineer, Evan, spends a good amount of time of the weekend cleaning up all of the audio files into a final show. And I begin to start working on the graphics for the upcoming week.
Sunday night, 11 p.m. on the West Coast, Evan uploads the final podcast file to our different host sites.
Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we begin to post the links on social media and send the assets to all of our guests for the week, as well as our friends at Celebrity Access.
And about an hour later, we start thinking about the next week's show. What we talked about here is a pretty dumbed down version of the process, but it gives you an idea of what we do on a weekly basis to prepare for Promoter 101.
Also leaving out how much responsibility Evan has to make sure that our guests, including me and Luke, sound as good as possible when you hear the audio, so it doesn't sound like a mixtape train wrecked on a boombox.
And believe us, a lot of this stuff is certainly not a single first take. Evan does an amazing job of making our interviews sound super polished, and he does an amazing job at making Dan and I sound a lot more conversant than we are.
With that said, that's a pretty quick idea of how we do the podcast, in case you were wondering. And if not, screw it. Let's talk about the tweets.
Hey everybody, I'm Chuck Randall. I'm a tour manager, tour director, and a tour accountant for, well, all of your favorite bands. Going back to the mid-'80s, I've been doing it for about 30 years. A few of the ones that you may have heard of include Bob Weir and Rat Dog and the Grateful Dead, and most recently 11 years with Alice in Chains, The Cult, Korn, Garbage, the Goo Goo Dolls. And here I am on Promoter 101.
It's time for News of the Week.
We're excited to have our good friend from Amplify magazine as well as Billboard, Dave Brooks, is back with us to talk about the news of the week. How you doing, Dave?
Thanks for having me, Steiny.
So it's been a big couple weeks for you. You had the scoop on Fire Festival. You were probably the only person in the country that festival actually did something good for it, like really upped your profile.
There was so many news items coming out of that thing. I mean, we worked it to death, and I would say traffic for our site on Fire Stories was through the roof.
Okay, because I mean, honestly, I was excited to read about it and was fascinated when you broke the story. But by the time that weekend was over 2 weeks ago, I was Fire Festival to death. And I'm just kind of wondering, is that something that the public is still like eating up, or is it maybe it's just me?
Well, there's 7 ongoing lawsuits, potential FBI investigation, so it's not over.
Okay, and I wasn't going to get too deep into this, but since you brought it up, because it wasn't an American festival, how deep can the FBI get into helping here?
I think they can look at how the money was raised in the U.S. I think there's a lot of questions about loans, kickbacks, even potential Ponzi scheme type fundraising. So, like they say in journalism and law enforcement, follow the money.
Well, I mean, I think there's a reason that Pablo Escobar had his island where it was, and that was because he was out of the U.S. military's reach. And I think that's why they chose that island.
There's a private K. You got amazing beaches. And I don't know if you've seen the swimming pigs. They're really cute. So I'm sure there's a lot of reasons they wanted to be over there in the Bahamas.
Sounds like an episode of The Simpsons just waiting to happen. All right, well, let's jump on into the news.
So we just reported at Billboard that Desert Trip is not happening in 2017. Lots of rumors that this was going to be the year that Led Zeppelin got back together and played the ultimate Get reunion show. Sorry to tell you, Paul Tillett confirmed with me it's not happening.
There's another rumor floating around that one of the East Coast promoters might be working on this too. But this guy knows how to get a band back together, so I haven't given up all hope just yet.
What's it going to take to get Robert Plant to agree to do it?
I believe David Byrne once said, a reunion is like asking someone to go back and date their ex-wife all over again. And it's a really awkward thing to do. And when you look at it that way, you can understand why people don't want to reopen some of those old wounds. But it is the 50th anniversary. We are talking about Led Zeppelin. They did do it a handful of years ago at O2. So, and the fact that Plant said never say never is still out there. You gotta believe there's fucking hope, man.
Hey, without hope, what do we have, right?
The albums, dude. The albums. What else is going on out there?
So interesting news with Ticketmaster and their verified fan program. You remember this is the system used to kind of keep scalpers and bots out of the on sale. The idea is that they can cross-check names, email addresses, phone numbers before the tickets go on sale to keep secondary market activity from happening. So they've made a big deal about this technology with Ed Sheeran and 21 Pilots, and they decided to use it for the Harry Styles tour. So what's interesting about this is it's caused a huge backlash because they've invited hundreds of thousands of Harry Styles fans to register to buy tickets. But when they put the tickets on sale, there was only about 40,000 tickets available. And because anybody could buy 4 tickets, really there was only about 10,000 available purchases for hundreds of thousands of people. So what happened? People log in on Saturday morning. They enter the code. Tickets aren't there. They think they've been pre-approved for these tickets, and they turn around and see them on StubHub. We've seen this movie so many times, and it ends the same way. People are outraged. And in this case, Ticketmaster actually had to issue a kind of apology, explaining that maybe they could have handled it a little better.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. You say 10,000 ticket buyers got seats. Are you talking about per market, or are you talking about for the whole tour?
For the whole tour. Harry Styles is playing theaters. He's not playing arenas. He's not playing stadiums. He's playing 13 intimate shows in the U.S., venues like the Ryman, the Greek Theater in L.A., Radio City Music Hall. The entire tour for this 13 shows was 45,000 tickets. And if a fan can buy 4 tickets, that's really 10,000 transactions available.
That is still a staggering low number of ticket buyers that received seats. 3 shows would have been 10,000 tickets. The other 10 shows were missing. That's 30,000 seats. That's a full arena of where did they go. And clearly you're saying it looks like StubHub.
Well, immediately people started seeing tickets appear on sites like StubHub. Ticketmaster, they did their own calculation, and they said about 5% of the tickets from the on sale went on StubHub. So it's just one of these instances where they've encouraged all these people to sign up in advance to buy these tickets. They knew the demand would be far greater than the available tickets, and they put them on sale anyways.
I don't think that kid's ever had a bad hair day, but good for him. We're going to see arenas coming up in the near future with him, if not stadiums. I mean, he's clearly next level successful, and I guess the other 4 guys from the band are wondering what the fuck happened to them, just like Justin Timberlake's band members in NSYNC. This is just a whole new day of bad.
Hey, I like the new Harry Styles song, too. I think it's kind of catchy.
All right, you and millions of girls all over the world, Dave. What else is going on, my friend?
Interesting news there in New York. The Attorney General there, Eric Schneiderman, has been really aggressive about going after the resale market, especially bots. And this week he announced settlements with 7 different brokerage companies involved in buying tickets and bots and flipping tickets on the secondary. One of the companies he went after, Prestige Entertainment, actually agreed to settle $3.5 million for basically using bots to buy up tickets for events in New York. That included a 2014 U2 concert where they snapped up 1,000 tickets in less than a minute. So Schneiderman's showing that he's serious about going after people using bots. And what's interesting about this case is that this settlement deals with actions that happened before the federal bots law was enacted. So if he catches anybody after the bots law was enacted, which is close to the beginning of the year, they could also face a criminal penalty. So this is kind of a wake-up call to the scalpers using this technology that, hey, you might end up in handcuffs if you get caught.
What else is happening out there in the world?
After 146 years, the circus has come to an end. We reported in Amplify this week that the last 2 touring units, Out of This World, which closed up at Nassau Coliseum on Long Island, and Extreme, which just closed out at Dunkin' Donuts Center in Providence, are officially done.
So I think everybody's got great memories of the circus as a kid, and it just isn't the same without the elephants. I know that there'll be substitutions and different versions of it that'll get rolled out over the next couple of years, and I'm sure somebody will try and buy the brand at some point and probably roll it back out the same way that Hostess was re-rolled out in past years. Promoter 101 having Dave Brooks on for the news. Thanks so much, Mr. Amplified Media.
Dan, some breaking news as we're recording this podcast on Thursday afternoon. Billboard is reporting, as is Variety, that L.A. Reid is out at Epic Records. L.A. was the chairman and CEO of Epic Records for almost 6 years, and the move comes just weeks after former Columbia Records chief Rob Stringer assumed his new role of Sony Music Entertainment. Rob was bumped up from chairman of Columbia up into that role. getting the big seat over at Sony. This is interesting to me, Dan. LA had a pretty successful run, moving Epic really into the urban roster space, some big signs in Future and DJ Khaled and Meghan Trainor.
Pink, for God's sakes, the guy's huge.
Well, I mean, those were IDJ days, and he had some time there. But just the 6 years alone in Epic, you forgive him for the rocky start that he might have experienced there when he was on Simon Cowell's The X Factor. I think he certainly was making a name and a brand for himself, but you can't argue with the guy's track record, certainly. Kind of surprised by this. What do you think is next for L.A. Reid?
He could do nothing and still have a legendary career that's suited for the Hall of Fame, but he's not going to go quietly into the night, so he'll resurface. Give him a minute. He's far from done, I'm sure.
And he's the kind of guy that typically makes quick announcements right after this, so I'd expect we'd be talking about L.A. Reid again very shortly.
Pitbull has been signed by William Morris Endeavor. See what happens with that, but that seems like a good pairing.
Jay-Z and Live Nation inked a new 10-year deal worth a reported $200 million. Jay-Z and Live Nation are continuing their long-standing touring partnership with this new deal that's covering all worldwide touring, with Live Nation both producing and promoting. Financial details weren't 100% there, but Billboard is sourcing it at $200 million.
Well, they have Beyonce, so I'm sure she got her husband the deal. That's probably how that worked out.
You can just walk Jay-Z right over.
Thanks for the intro there. The Americana nominations have been announced, and Sturgill Simpson is out front of the pack with 3 nods.
Congrats to Sturgill and Mark and his whole team over there. Very excited for him. That's it for the news of the week.
Hi, this is Scott Perry. You can catch me on Promoter 101 with Dan Steinberg.
It wouldn't be a Promoter 101 podcast without the tweets of the week. Let's see what Dan said this week on Twitter. If you're not following him, he's at The Jew on Twitter. Finding the middle ground between being flexible versus getting walked over is a daily fight.
You got to be workable or no one's going to want to work with you. But you got to know where to draw the line because this industry will take you for everything you've got.
The guy with the biggest address book always wins.
I might have borrowed this one from Bob Lefsetz, but it's true. The biggest address books has a serious advantage. With that said, how quickly you can find somebody's contact information when you need them is dire.
It has to happen. Means they want me to spend money we never agreed to originally, and they're unwilling to contribute.
It's amazing the things that people have to have when it's not their money. I noticed that acts have to stay in a suite if I'm picking up a hotel, but if they're willing to take a buyout, that same act always is willing to stay at an Econo Lodge.
When an agent thinks you're stupid.
It's amazing. People tend to underestimate you from time to time, but it's never a good idea to show a little respect to the people you're working with. It may pay off in the long run.
No one ever tells you it's about the music when the show is selling.
Love that. Truer words have never been spoken.
That does it for Promoter 101 Tweets of the Week. You can follow Dan on Twitter as @TheJew.
Hello, my name is Renatas Nachajus. I'm from Lithuania. My company is Falcon Club, Promoter 101.
It's time once again for 3 questions where listeners come on the show and get to ask Steiny and I 3 questions they'd like. Industry, personal, whatever they want. Most importantly, we haven't seen these questions in advance.
This week, we're joined by Nashville's own comedy talent buyer, Lisa Martin Roberts.
Welcome, Lisa. Excited to have you. What are your questions?
Promoter 101, joining us on 3 questions this week. Bill Kittle is co-hosting with us while Luke is on the road traveling internationally with Home Free. But we're joined by Lisa Roberts of Nashville. Lisa, thanks so much for listening to the podcast and for playing 3 questions with us.
Yeah, no problem. My first question is for you, Dan. What are some things a venue can do to make show day easy for the promoter and touring entourage? And is there a specific venue or venue management group that you enjoy working with the most because they are doing these things well?
I like the folks at the Riverside Pabst and Turner Hall in Milwaukee. They have a way of making the backstage experience comfortable. They've turned it into like a coffee house backstage at each show where there's a barista and there's like a library or video games and you can hang out. So it's not like you're just in this like uncomfortable, drabby basement. You feel like you're in a Starbucks backstage, like, and everything's free and there's pop, there's coffee, there's water, there's ambiance, there's things to do, and you don't want to run back and hide on the bus. You're comfortable in that backstage experience and you feel like you wanted to be there. And I think acts look forward to places where they get to come back and have that experience. Venues that are promoter friendly, that are ready to lend a hand, give advice for the local market, talk about what is and isn't working in the market and being honest about it, not opening with everything saying we're a walk market and discounting everything else with that, but actually telling us jazz doesn't sell here, but we've had really good success with reggae. When they know those things and they can help us give input of like, oh, okay, well, I can make sure that we route this act in who hasn't been here in a while that we do a lot with, and maybe keep this act out who we also work with, but maybe won't be so promising, because we want to do as much volume as possible in all of those rooms without possibly losing any money. So those kind of things really help us.
Okay, great. And my second question is for Bill. What is your most memorable ad mat or radio spot that you've worked on or seen other staff create at the tour design office?
One of the ones recently that we did was a year and a half ago or so was the KISS Freedom to Rock tour. They came up with the concept and we really knocked it out of the park, I feel, with our creative design on that, which lent itself very well to both radio and TV and digital as well. So I was really happy that, an ad mat concept worked across all platforms of advertising. That was really rewarding, and getting a chance to work with Gene and Paul and having them actually like it, that was actually awesome as well.
My last question, Dan, is a non-business question. I know you're a fan of the classic film A Christmas Story that was filmed in my hometown area of Cleveland, Ohio. The house it was filmed in is now available for overnight rentals. You could actually sleep on Ralphie or Randy's twin bed. Do you pay the $500 average per night premium for the experience, which goes up to $2,000 on Christmas Eve, or are they looking for suckers?
What's the question? This seems like a give me. Fuck yeah, you pay. It sounds awesome. And I didn't know it existed, but yeah, in a second, I would take my daughter and I would absolutely spend the money. Bill, would you do it?
Absolutely. That is awesome.
Nice.
Thanks so much for playing 3 questions. I appreciate it, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Promoter 101 for 3 questions, Lisa. If you'd like to be on 3 questions and turn the tables on me and Luke, please email us at steiny@promoter101.net.
Hey, this is Rob Zaffarelli.
Adiane Tarleton.
Paul Lord. Phil Rodriguez.
Rick Greenstein.
Renatas Nachayos.
Rob Pellet. Rich Mills. Sasha Bombaji.
Seth Hurwitz. Steve Martin.
Whitney Bond.
This is Trip Brown. Wayne Forte.
Steve Zapp.
Trevor Solomon.
Live on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
This week, owner and founder of Partisan Arts Tom Chauncey sat down with Dan to talk about the challenges in booking the entire world.
Promoter 101, we're at ILMC and joined by an old friend, Tom Chauncey. Thank you for taking the time.
Nice to be here. Nice to be hanging out with you in London.
No, it's
with a view.
A fun thing. Yeah, we're right behind, out the window. Kensington Palace is right behind us. It's I feel spoiled.
Yeah, a remarkably sunny day in London, so I guess we're taking advantage of that by being indoors in a conference in the basement. But it's all good.
So is the way of our industry. Backstages of cement basketball arenas and...
Yeah, in the dark corners of the building, we do our business.
All right, well, you've had an interesting career. You were at Rosebud for a while, and that's where it really developed, right?
Yeah, I was there for 16 years. Before that, I was a manager of a band. They were called Wire Train, and they were like a new wave, kind of echoing the Bunnymen meet U2, and got a record deal with Howie Klein's 415 label, and at the time I was 21, just turned 21, able to buy a drink in a bar, managing a band that got a record deal. We didn't know a thing about what we were doing, and it was an incredible experience. Got in the van, drove around the country a couple times. Paul Goldman was the agent, so...
Paul Goldman,
yeah.
Talk about legends.
Yeah, it was great. When Paul would call, I would be very excited. I mean, the idea that your agent would call you was like the most thrilling thing ever. That lasted a little while, and then when the band was in between records...
This is circa what?
This is 1984, 85, something like that. The band was in between records, and I was painting houses because the band was my only source of income at the time. I was the 5th Beatle for the band.
Like a waitress waiting tables, hoping to make it between auditions.
I was the manager, but I was also like the front of house guy. I drove the van. I mean,
whatever it takes.
Yeah, we were just doing what we were doing, and it was brilliant. It was a great moment. But I took a job at Rosebud answering phones, and then that eventually turned into, would you like to do a full-time job? And that turned into me becoming an agent. Had no intention of being an agent.
Which is funny because you were clearly the biggest agent that company had ever seen.
Well, Mike Kappas ran that company, and it was really his vision since day one.
But he never had the roster you had.
Well, he had pretty much every significant blues artist there was.
And unfortunately, they're not worth near that they should be, because those are great albums. John Lee Hooker was on that roster.
Yeah, but this was a different era. You got to remember, back in that time, that was his passion. So he worked with all those artists. They were brilliant artists. There was blues and jazz people were his passion. I took a job there not knowing anything about that kind of music. And for me, it was an eye-opener. The only thing I knew was, like, I'll call it new wave or what was punk rock then. And here I was coming in 21, not knowing anything about roots music, and this whole world opened up to me. And through that, I also started listening to world music, as it was known at the time. So eventually became an agent there. Mike let me open the door, let me sign in bands. Signed Ben Harper, Zap Mama, Femi Kuti, bunch of great artists. And after 16 years, I decided to move on and do my own thing. And that's when I started my company, so 16 years ago.
And you've since added Hank Sachs to the mix, right?
Hank came in, fantastic. He is the hardest working guy out there. Tremendous roster, signing great acts. And between him and I, we're super busy, and it's been a journey. And it's still going strong. It's awesome.
Between both of you, it's just two agents, right? It's the two of you guys.
My assistant, Thomas Ponsart, is now an agent. I'm happy to say. You know, he's starting to do some booking for me.
So 3 of you booking now?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's the roster?
There's 40 plus artists right now.
Big Head Todd's there, right?
Sure. The roster in terms of names, Big Head Todd, Disco Biscuits, Grace Potter, Jack Johnson, Manu Chao. Took some of my international artists. Manu Chao, Amadou and Mariam, Yael Naim, Paolo Conte, Ben Howard.
ALO's there still, right?
ALO, yeah, tremendous stuff. Hank's just signed the Hip Abduction, fantastic new artist. Green Sky Bluegrass is doing great. Fruition. We've got a lot of new bands in the last year.
A lot of stuff on the festival circuit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a key component of the touring business, as you know.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. And you're one of the few agents, you and Wayne Forte, that jump from the U.S. and come over to this conference.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a pretty good worldview as an agent. The festival thing has always been big here, and certainly it's taken off in the States thanks to the help of the C3 guys and obviously Paul Tillet's vision. But in America now, we have a very similar model to the festival style. Do you feel that that's changed music in the States since we've adopted the European festival model for the summers?
Changed music in terms of culturally, creatively, or more like the business structure?
Actually, I think there's two good questions there. I was actually just thinking of the touring style, but I'd like to hear your opinion on both if you don't mind.
Well, with touring style, yeah, it's changed. I mean, there used to be a short list of influential festivals that existed and that really mattered. And then in the last, 10 years, as we've seen, there's an explosion in the number of festivals. And now there's a festival in every market pretty much, or every region, or 2 or 3. Then there's the mega festivals, then there's the specialist festivals. So there's a menu of options, really. I think the challenge now is really to understand what those festivals represent and when to look for a slot at those festivals. You know, it's not a new thing. You know, you'll hear people talking about Coachella or Lollapalooza. In theory, when it's the right time for the artist to play. First up on the main stage, first up on a secondary stage, you know, when nobody's there, that could be a horrible slot for some bands.
Just to be on the lineup and the advertising is good if nobody sees you play.
Nobody sees you play. But conversely, sometimes the gig itself may be the least important thing in the equation, meaning talking about the fact that you have a slot at Coachella or Lollapalooza can be hugely advantageous when you're ramping up to it. It's just the same thing about when you have an artist and they're about to release their record. Anything is possible. The record is about to come out. Everyone wants to believe. Everyone gets excited. When the record comes out, it may not be such a big deal.
I think we've seen that sometimes in the past. And like Phoenix doing the second night a couple of years ago at Coachella, I think there was a lot of hope that album was going to be a lot bigger than it was when Paul gave him that slot.
Things like that happen all the time. So you have to be strategic about when you ask, and it needs to make sense. And so every artist has their own strategy and approach. And well, that's how Hank and I really sort of try and approach it ourselves. And the contrast between Europe and the US, just sort of to touch on that. Yeah, the festival scene here is mature and well established. And it was amazing to come over here and learn about that and try and understand how festivals were culturally like the rite of passage for kids. That's been that way in Europe for 30 years or more. So that is exciting. That cultural door that opens up when kids go to that summer festival and how their minds get blown. That's huge for us as an industry. We can turn people on to like amazing things through festivals. That's great. You know what I mean?
Okay, so Jack has taken off quite a bit of time from touring and is now going back out and doing a big summer tour.
Mm-hmm.
With an artist on that level who's got to be the biggest on your roster, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Grace is clearly getting there, but the ups and downs of having an artist that big touring and then not touring,
as an independent business, does that affect how you plan what else goes out that year or how many more clients you sign if you know that Jack won't be working for 2 or 3 years? Is that something that you're looking for, things that are going to be bringing in revenue to keep the peaks and valleys even? Because that's got to be a challenge,
I'm happy
right?
to say that the business is financially strong whether Jack works or not. We've got a great roster, and a lot of people work a lot. So the business works whether Jack is working or not, just purely from a personal, structural way. But when Jack works, it's obviously fantastic. I mean, we just went up with 18 shows, and they're pretty much all going to blow out or all sell out and do incredible business. No new record. It's been a few years since he went out, and it's just clear that his fans love him. They want to see him, and it's not really about a new record. It's about, that Jack Johnson is somebody you like and you want to go see live. He's got
Certainly
these songs
it's built
that
some
are,
demand.
Yeah, I mean, and staying away certainly helps him in a way. I think he could work every year if he wanted to, but the fact that he doesn't makes it more special when he does, and it's going to be an awesome summer. Can't wait.
There's a handful of artists in that genre that came up at once. Him, John Mayer, Jason Mraz, that have that style where they broke through and maybe haven't had as many hits in the last couple of years, but their songs have really captured with their fans, and I don't see any of those guys ever going away. They seem like they have a James Taylor-esque locked into time mentality with their fan base. So it could seemingly make sense that Jack could be playing arenas 25 years from now, and the fan base is going to be just as strong. He will become one of those artists. It's easy to make that connection.
I think it's not just about music. It's about lifestyle and emotion.
Kind of like that Jimmy Buffett vibe where it's the feeling of it.
Like when you discover an artist at a certain point in your life and they really touch you, that resonates. And if it goes deep enough, it stays with you. Then, if you have great songs, like Jack does, truly great songs that become hits, then you're somebody that people want to continue to see for a long, long time. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think thankfully Jack can still write great songs, and he is. And he's in the studio right now.
I mean, he's kind of timeless. The songs are great.
Absolutely.
And his fan base clearly reacts to that.
It's great.
It's got to feel nice that he hasn't put out an album. You guys went up and all those venues are going to sell out. That was
It's
a little
huge.
bit of a gamble.
Yeah, well, you never know until you go up on sale. And when you do, in that moment when you're watching the numbers and you see that it's happening, it's pretty fantastic.
There's a feeling that promoters, agents, and managers all get about 10 seconds before the on sale happens. It's like, were we right? Did we make the right call? Especially when you go big.
You don't know.
Right. Because when
really
you buy
don't.
it and you set it up, you think you're in the right mind space. But the second before that gamble gets turned on, is anyone going to show up?
But now we've got indicators. We can look at streaming numbers. We did a really wonderful pre-sale campaign with Pandora. And what was interesting was to work with them to see what kind of numbers Jack has in their ecosystem.
Were you guys able to geo-target?
Absolutely. What's fascinating is when you say, you never really know until you flip the switch and you put the shows on sale. But what you do know is how many people are listening to your artist every day, where they are, how many new stations are being added, and what those metrics are. So you get a pretty good idea who's on people's minds, what they're listening to. So, you can extrapolate that and think if they're listening to it, they're thinking about the artist, they're probably likely to want to go see him live. So those were indicators that were strong, incredibly strong. And I'm happy to say that those folks also stepped up and bought tickets when we went on sale.
Now, you've been at an independent agency your entire career as an agent, right? I mean, you went from Rosebud and you started your own. Living in the Bay, it seems like there are other options. You could clearly be at a bigger agency if you wanted to. I'm sure those offers have come. So you've chosen to stay independent and work for yourself?
I have, and I don't have any regrets. I mean, I love what I do, and it's thrilling to be sort of the captain of your own ship and to be able to make your own decisions, pursue the artist that you want to pursue. I've had the honor and privilege of working with some amazing people in terms of my career. So make enough dough. I'm happy. We're doing interesting things. What's not to like?
Well, it certainly seems like you've got your position dialed when it comes to running that company. You've got your roster, you've grown the staff, and your roster seems to continue to grow. It's a very diverse roster as well.
Yeah, and that's sort of reflective of my personal taste and Hank's personal taste, and then the relationships that you naturally build through the artists that you're working with. Good things come from good things, is what I say. The relationships that we have with managers who will bring us an artist that's established that says, we're not really happy where we are, we'd like to talk to you, great. Or we'll see something new. I mean, we're still signing lots of new acts. We're really into artist development. That's ultimately what we do. And I think when you try and differentiate yourself between who we are, what we can offer people, and why we're able to succeed, it's because we're good at that. I like to talk strategy with people. I want to talk to you about why you're going to play somewhere, where you're going to play next year and the year after that, and how we're going to get there, and identify, weaknesses and try and figure out solutions. It's the basic stuff, but it's like taking the time to actually work through that with every artist and being interested enough and committed to say, I'm in. And if you look at the roster, a lot of artists that we've worked with for a very long time. And I think hopefully that's a testament for our clients, and it seems to be working, knock on wood.
What's the most current thing you've signed. What was the last signing?
I was at the Womex conference in Spain in October, and I signed a band from the Congo. They're called Jupiter Eaux Claires. They are incredible. They are sort of like the Chili Peppers meets the Bad Brains, and super strong live and visually unbelievable. They blew my mind. The other artist that I recently started working with is Mary Chapin Carpenter, incredible singer-songwriter who came to us and said, we should work together. So we said yes. So that's a pretty diverse spectrum of artistic endeavors. So Mary Chapin Carpenter, Jupiter Eaux Claires.
Great pack.
It just shows you my musical tastes are pretty broad. So we're happy to be doing all sorts of cool stuff.
No, it's super cool. I didn't realize you'd picked up Mary Chapin Carpenter.
Yeah, that's great. Also, most recently, Nako and Medicine for the People. We just started working with Nako. He just changed management, and management came to us and said, would you be interested? And I said, we'd love to. So that's really the newest things that I'm working on. Hank just signed a great band called The Hip Abduction. Phenomenal. So yeah, we got plenty of great new things.
The acts you work with, are you booking them mainly in North America, or are you representing things for the world now?
It's a blend. Primarily, our business now is North America. Some of our clients want worldwide representation, and when they do, we do that. Some of them say, we're happy with the person we work with in Australia or Europe. Would you be comfortable doing North America and South America? Yes. So there used to be a time where I was really adamant about, it's worldwide or nothing. But I think now my interest is working with great artists, and I'm happy to work with them in the territories where we can be effective. So we're flexible in that sense, but we do some business worldwide, some business just in North America. Depends on what people need.
Time change in that international business thing is something I still can't get a hang of. Especially right now at home, it's 2:57 a.m. as we're recording this.
Yes.
I mean, we're both West Coast people, so obviously we've adjusted to the time change here, but doing business over here is a trip to me, and we do some, but it's like dealing with international managers that live in London or different parts of the world. It's like even to get them on the phone and have that pitch moment, like you got to time it perfectly just as you're getting in before they leave the office for the day. It's like, it's a tough thing, or you get up in the middle of the night and have to work.
Yeah, well, you do what you got to do. Last night I was up typing email at 2 o'clock in the morning because my office was still open and people were needing to deal with things, but I'm not complaining. I'm in London. We're doing cool stuff. Life is good. These are not terrible problems.
Is there any recommendations you could give to some of the younger agents that are coming up in the business as advice?
Sure. I mean, I think if they're already an agent, they're doing something right. First of all, that in itself is not an easy place to get to. So clearly they've done some work somewhere to get to the point where someone has said, you're an agent. So that's an achievement in itself. But beyond that, I think people just need to follow their passion. We're in this in a broader sense. I sign artists that I think are relevant, and I sign artists that I think are impacting culturally. And I'm interested in finding people that pursue interesting and deeper ideas. So it's like trying to support culture. How can you contribute? Well, I'm going to go sign people that I think are important that you might not know about, but I want you to know about them. And so that's sort of the part of the mission, is trying to be relevant. It shouldn't be about making money. It should be about doing something interesting. Frankly, that's always been my number one priority. And it's always that sort of the cliche, do what you love and money will follow. I say do what you love, money will follow, but do what you love that you think is going to be interesting, that's going to impact.
Well, it makes sense. It's good advice. Tom Chauncey joining us in a beautiful London. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
There are very few people that are as well liked and respected as Tom Chauncey. I am always happy to spend a little time with him. This was no exception.
Hey, this is Rob Zaffarelli from UTA. I'm on Promoter 101.
We also had a chance to catch up with writer Larry LeBlanc. You might know him from his celebrity access industry profiles or his years of reporting at Billboard magazine. Either way, we can all agree that he's one music industry icon.
Promoter 101, we're at Canadian Music Week in the Suite, and we're joined by a dear friend, Larry LeBlanc. Thank you so much for being here.
Wow. Good having you up in Toronto finally again,
It is always a good time reading your profiles. It's one of the more in-depth journalists in the industry, because it's not 100 or 500 words on the guy of the moment. You really take some time and dive into someone, and you write a report about their history and their career and where they're going. It's not just the top 5 words. It really is a cool thing because you feel like you know someone after you read that Celebrity Access profile.
Well, I took over a series that was at Celebrity Access about 8 years ago, and a series that had ran, with Jane Cohen and Bob Gossinger was basically people either send in faxes, responses, or, send in emails. And when I came aboard, I went, no, I don't want to do that. I want to find out how people talk and how people are, and have dialogue. I want to capture the moment. And maybe perhaps this goes back to my new journalism days with, Tom Wolfe and people like Grail Marcus and people like that who started off writing in the 70s. And I think it also was a reaction. I'd been at Billboard for 17 years. And
that was a magazine in
the Billboard magazine, for almost 17 years. And before that at Record World. And, as I said, nearly 17 years at Billboard. They bounced a bunch of us out of there. But in the last 2, 3, 4 years, ever since really Timothy Whitehead died, it was sort of like you'd interview somebody really interesting and it'd be pulled down to where an article, say when I started there would be 1,500 words. We're now writing 500-word stories, squished down. So you talk to, like a president of a company or a top promoter or somebody really important, they'd have one line. Or 2 lines, or 3 lines. A quote, yeah. And you expect that when you did like Music Biz or something, Billboard Biz, which was the online version or something like that, you'd expect to do that, or if it was something really, really fast. But it got frustrating. And at the same time, when you started seeing industry Q&As, they were all the same. They were obviously being done by fax or by email. And they were very dry. People don't talk that way. One of the things I also wanted to do is I wanted to capture the way people talk. I mean, I'll clean up some language and move some things around and clean up some of the grammar.
But you won't change their message.
No, not at all. And the thing about it is, will I ask hard questions? Absolutely. But do I put them on the spot? Depends. If they deserve to be on the spot and if they say something outrageous, I'll sit there and go, oh, come on. That's not true. Or the thing that has changed in our business is when I came into the business writing in the mid-60s, 70s, there were no filters. Then there became publicists. Then there became consultants, who would train executives how to talk to you, how to talk in certain executive speak and stuff like that. And now we're back, and I will never allow, even when I was at Billboard, I think I only did it once with somebody from Apple. Did I allow their public relations person to stay on the line? I'd never do it. But the one guy I needed so badly at Apple, it was sort of like my Billboard editor said, don't come home without him being in the article. And I went, okay, he's got a public relations. And actually, it turned out actually quite well. He was pretty good. But the people I do basically have a pretty good mind of their own. They know what they're talking about, and they're confident in what they're talking about. I've had a few junior agents get a little frightened, particularly in LA. I remember dealing with somebody who went, oh my God, because he was saying, oh, us young Turks look upon these old guys as old turkeys type of thing. And he says, I'm going to get so much in trouble for that. And I said, no, they're going to think it's funny. And they did think it was funny. So I don't think I've ever had to do a retraction because I tape everything. And if I think something's way out of kilter, like would really get somebody in trouble, like really, and I don't mean trouble with the industry, but trouble, say, with their bosses. And say it's a junior person, then you got to take a look at that and look at it at a different way. But if you go head to head, certainly with a lot of the agency people and managers and stuff like that, they've done enough interviews so they can hold their own.
Yeah, there's some personalities there too.
When I came to Celebrity Access, I knew the live music world to a certain level. I knew the Toronto Canadian live world, and I only knew it on certain, almost superficial way. I go back, say, with Bruce Allen as a manager, and back to maybe the early 70s. Sam Feldman, I knew just after he was, a doorman at the Daisy. And, I knew the Steve Hermans. I knew the different people at Feldman, the different people at the agency group and stuff like that. And Riley O'Connor, of course, people like that. I knew them, but I really didn't know their business. I was, much like with Michael Cohen, Arthur Foco, and people like that, I'd be calling them for a quote, or calling them for this, or maybe asking, can I go to the odd show or something like that. Until I started doing this, I knew about, say, Canadian history into the United States, and I knew, say, Frank Barcelona and Barbara Scudell I knew quite well. Barbara Scudell I really knew well. So I knew,
really?
Yeah, so I knew the history of certain aspects, and I knew Barry Fay. So, because there was a bleed over all the time of Canadian groups that would be touring when I was at Billboard in the United States. So I kind of knew some, pockets of different people. But to sit down, as I did for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame series that I did with Don Law for 5.5 hours, I sat down with Larry Maggot for almost 6 hours. I sat down with Harvey Goldsmith for 6 hours. I sat down with Peter Rudge for 5 hours and really get into the nuts and bolts. I really had to learn what it was about their business. And, guys like, Jay Marciano have been so helpful to me. Michael Rapino has been really helpful. And Michael Rapino will answer. He won't do an interview with me. He's almost there. We're almost at the tipping point. I'm going to give him heck this week because he's here in Toronto doing an interview with a friend of his. And I'm not jealous. We've agreed and we're going to do it at the same point. Same thing, Marciano, and I've been planning one now for about 6 months.
Jay's a fun interview.
I knew Jay because he was stationed here. Don't forget, in Toronto. He worked
like it's like the military. He did his time in Canada. He went overseas to Canada.
Well, that's kind of the
and
way.
Jay built this market for Live Nation.
Yeah,
even
yeah.
though he was never at Live Nation per se.
House of Blues.
He built the House of Blues
Yeah,
system that
yeah.
Live Nation wound up gobbling up.
Yeah.
But he built this team, and when you talk to him about it, he'll be the first one to say, we're not as big in Canada because it's hard to build a team that's as good as the one I already built.
Oh, he already beat it. Him and Steve Herman, of course. You had that, and what's his name at Madison Square Gardens that came from here too as well. Mine escapes me. I mean, this is the farm team up here, and they all like coming to Toronto.
I like the farm team concept.
I was going to say, this is promoter boot camp over here. The Canadians are eating the Americans' lunch.
Pro wrestlers go to Minneapolis, promoters come to Canada to learn the game, and then they get called to the chef.
But here's the difference, okay? Don't forget, after Frank Barcelona basically parceled out all the country, to different promoters, to the 15, 20, whatever the count was, all these young promoters, and
the Frank Barcelona Promoter Network.
It absolutely was, but there were little fiefdoms. Well, we had up here we didn't have somebody that operated like Danny Selesco out of Phoenix and stuff like that who had a territory. You had Michael Coe up here who had the whole country, because don't forget, they operated out of Vancouver with an office. And
Let's stop for a second and go back and explain to our listeners who Frank was real quick, because people that are vets of the industry will know, but we have a good number of listeners who are younger, and I think Frank's a name that gets repeated a lot. And since we have
a lot of people don't know him, yeah.
Let's get back to finishing that story, but let's take a second before we jump ahead, and let's talk about who Frank was and why that network that he developed was so important. And you're talking about guys like Barry Fay,
yeah,
and Bill Graham, and Don Law and Larry Maggot that were part of that network.
They were all the juniors at the time, don't forget, as well, too.
But it was basically like a mafia boss system that he set up.
Gosh, really? No, I'm teasing. Exactly like the mafia.
But you couldn't pass on shows. You were assigned shows, essentially. This is what came down from national.
Yeah, first off, Frank, I think I met at William Morris, because I think he was there at one point. He was somewhere else before he set up Premier Talent Agency. And the big thing that he discovered was British acts. And British acts, really were huge in the Canadian market at that time. The Beatles broke here 9 months before they broke in the United States. The Who broke here way before they broke in the States. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on of all the different things that broke here. But he had a lock on those British bands when agencies like William Morris and what have you were going, music. The bigger agencies weren't interested in music. They had Bobby Vinton, and basically they had Broadway, and they had film, and that's what the sexy part of the business
Wayne
was.
Forte came into place over at William Morris.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a little bit later.
Right. No, he was certainly following Frank's lead there.
Frank opened up Premier, and I remember you'd have shows like you go look at the bills of the old Murray Decay shows, for example, that ran in New York. Murray Decay at the Brooklyn Fox or Murray and McKay, the thing. You'd have like 18 that were Frank Barcelona acts. It was like The Who. It was like Herman, all these different acts, what have you. And so what happened was he started taking those acts out into other parts of America. And of course, the one that really, really was the door opener for everybody, and everybody, of course, clamored for, was Led Zeppelin. So Led Zeppelin is, if you want, was a couple of years later, but you don't want to go and look at, say, Barry Fay. Barry Fay's first real big show was Led Zeppelin. And when they were nobody, they weren't even a big act at that particular time. And they played, remember, in Toronto here, they played the Rock Pile. I mean, there was like maybe 100 people there, maybe 200. Next time they came back, they were huge, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger.
I think Barry's first big show was The Doors.
Might have been The Doors, yeah. But I mean...
But Led Zeppelin's first American show ever was opening in Denver.
That's right.
So
for Freyline, yeah.
Right, so I think that might be...
That's the connection.
Barry was a bigger promoter when they came over, and he was promoting those shows. Barry's a little ahead of that, but yeah, The Doors were there.
Yeah, but The Doors were spreading out, don't forget, through California and stuff like that. And The Doors in the early days, I saw The Doors at the Whiskey and places like that. They were getting like $150, $200 a night back in the early club days, and then playing Cyril's and Harrow's and some of the smaller clubs in there. I was there the night Steppenwolf released their albums. I mean, there wasn't the formal system, that became. It's like, oh, we know a guy up in Denver. Oh, okay, well, let's go play Denver for, this guy, Barry Fay. Okay, like that.
Acts would just drive through, right? Because they just play on weekends. So Salt Lake wouldn't necessarily get a date. You'd play San Francisco one weekend and you do multiple shows. Then you go play Denver for multiple shows.
Absolutely, yep.
And then the days
Or you'd go into a club,
Right.
for 6 days. Don't forget there was a lot of that. And also don't forget that
Denver had their own family dog that Barry ran.
Yeah, and the other thing that you'd also do, quite frankly, is you had to watch that you got exactly the right band when you hired the band, because there were so many fake bands out, for a period of time. Guys in ZZ Top, I forget, they used to pretend that they were one of the British bands. I forget what it was, but there were so many different things.
Really?
There were so many things like that going on, and the only two people were doing multiple shows. Dick Clark, those shows were still going on in the early parts of the 60s. He'd put multiple on. And what's his name from Ringham Barnum Circus? Irvin Fowle. He created the whole thing, when he noticed, oh boy, I'm putting all these circus acts in. What are you guys doing in the summertime? What's going on here? Are these buildings free on other dates? Yeah, well, let's put some rock and roll shows. Irv Fowle managed people like Paul Anka and people like the Buddy Holly tour was an Irv Fowle tour.
Wait a minute. So Feld, who owns the circus and owns monster trucks and owns Disney on Ice, that started from that?
Yeah.
Paul Anka.
Wow.
Yeah, Paul Anka, a little piece of trivia for you is Paul Anka wrote Diane and tried to give it to Chuck Berry backstage at the in Ottawa, and Sweet Little 16 was written about little girls looking for autographs when Chuck Berry played in Ottawa for on an Irv Fowle bill. Irv Fowle, one of the early managers of Paul Anka, who was on all those bills and kept them out. And a lot of those tours that they did, they'd have, as you know, like 18, 20 acts on. And you got up and you sang 2 songs, 3 songs. Next, you went into the bus. The black acts did not go into the, into certain towns, into the hotels and whatever have you. The next after that was the Motown Review. Back in Motown Reviews, I think started touring 62 for sure, 61, 62, 63, because Supremes hadn't had their big hits yet. They were still doing songs like Buttered Popcorn and stuff like that. The big act of the Supremes back in those days would have been like Mary Wells and Smokey Robinson when Claudette was still playing, and they did it. But there was no system, if you want. Frank set up the system. It should have been called the system, because that's what it was. And up here we had wrestling with different type thing. Michael Cole bumped out a guy that ran shows up here for years and years called Martin Onrod. Marty,
He put him out of business. He didn't literally bump him out.
As close as you could.
He placed them on waivers. Okay.
He politely asked him to change industries.
Martin had control of the Toronto market and part of Ottawa and going into Quebec market, and did a lot of work across Canada. And he had control at that point of Maple Leaf Gardens. Michael Coe had done 4 shows and maybe a couple shows in Maple Leaf Gardens, including his first big show with Buck Owens. This is after, by the way, he ran a burlesque house up in Ottawa with Harvey Glatt, the first burlesque house in all of Canada to take the tassels off the nipples.
So you could see their boobies?
Oh, yeah. They went to court over that and almost went to jail. And anyways, the night they did it, they had a film crew there. Okay, from the local television station. The local television station actually showed the unleashed boobies. Now you're into an obscenity trial.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd televise boobies.
Yeah, well, they made the mistake. They did. What Michael did, as I said, Martin Onrod up to that point was doing like Elton John, doing all the big shows at Maple Leaf Gardens. Maple Leaf Gardens got it in their ideas, why don't we have our in-house person do it ourselves? Michael Cole applied and was given a salary. I think it was $35,000 a year.
What year is this roughly?
Late 60s, early 70s, okay. I guess. And essentially, he became an employee of Maple Leaf Gardens.
So 60s, that's like $100,000, $120,000 in modern day.
Yeah, but what he did was, then he made a partnership with one of the people there and also Bill Ballard, whose father owned the gardens. Then they created Concert Production International.
CPI.
It is I with him. And then and then Michael did a partnership with 2 other people. Harvey Glatt, who was running Bass Clef up in Ottawa, and also with Donald Tarleton down in Montreal, who had the Forum, of course. And there's a relationship between the Forum and Maple Leaf Gardens. Both hockey, the owners are both involved. And when you did that, you had a stranglehold in the country after that. And then Michael Coe and CPI basically went, okay, we have the Gardens. If you put an act in DeMassey Hall, which is, our 2,800 seater here, don't expect ever to play the Gardens again. Pardon? Well, if you play for Martin Onrod here, you're not playing here. All of a sudden, Martin is out. Michael controls everything. He starts a record company, Daffodil Records. He starts also our ownership in Daffodil Records along with Ronnie Hawkins and Frank Davies. He also starts a booking agency called The Agency, not to be mixed with the Agency Group. It's called The Agency, that eventually, about a decade later, ends up merging with Sam Feldman. We had all this going on, but essentially, if you went to a show in the 1970s, and, Michael was putting on with CPI about 300 shows a year, that's a lot of shows. And they also found out there's money to be made in the Boondocks, where, quite frankly, in America, it took you guys a long time or more time to find out that you can put acts in the middle of Newfoundland and come home with a lot of money. You can put Elton John up in Sudbury and really come home with a lot of money. So all that was going on here. And then Michael, of course, as you know, goes into bit by bit into the States. He bought Phaline, and then he bought another agency in the South. I can't remember the one that it was, but it was an agency that had been around for a long period of time. And then, of course, the big one was he goes up against Bill Graham for the Steel Wheels tour with the Rolling Stones and walks away with the Rolling Stones. And that changed how it was, because he was able to go to the rest of the promoters and go, here's the deal. You want the deal? You don't want the deal? Fine, we'll go here. We'll do it ourselves.
Call him the Beard of Knowledge for a reason.
Michael Coe is always 6 chess moves ahead of everybody else.
Kind of the Spider-Man of the concert industry.
I wouldn't go that far.
Let's change tack. Let's talk about you. So, historically, you're kind of the Cameron of the Canadian world. Like, Almost Famous is basically your story, right?
No, I didn't go out with the Allman Brothers and meet the Butter Queen. No. I was on the road, mind you, with the guys. First off, I come from outside of Toronto, just about 35 miles, a little town, not even a town, it's just a valley called West Rouge. And I was booking bands at 14 and 15. They had a dance up in one time, and it was like a big band playing our dance, like playing Glenn Miller music, and it was like that, that moment out of Footloose. What? We got to have our own music. We got to have a band. Well, first off, they said you can't run dances. You're not part of a club here at the school, Dumbarton High School. I started the chess club. We met here and there, and we ran in dances. The first band I hired was a band called the Spastics that arrived and forgot their cymbals. And Jim Campbell, who was in the group, ended up working at Warner Brothers and RCA later. He works for Gary Slate's company here in Toronto now. And from there, that was a non-union band. I did a couple non-union bands. Then I hooked up with the big agency back in those days was the Ron Scribner Agency that became later the Big Land Agency. Ron Scribner Agency was Ron Scribner and Tommy Wilson, and with some backing with Ronnie Hawkins. In fact, they worked above Le Coq d'Or, where Ronnie held court. And I started booking...
What's the name of that?
Le Coq d'Or.
Is it supposed to sound like it?
Yes, it does. Le Coq d'Or. It doesn't mean what you think it does. It's a rooster, Anyways, I started booking bands that were popular at that time that had booking contracts and recording contracts for that time, like Little Caesar and the Consuls, who had the number one hit here in Canada was Sloopy, Rich Night and the Midnights, David Clayton Thomas and the Shays, David going on to Blood, Sweat and Tears. So I was booking, all those and getting to know people. And I started writing for the Ajax Advertiser, got brought into Toronto to write for something called the After 4 section of the Toronto Telly, which was like the Daily News back then. And my first interview was, live interview was Ronnie Hawkins in 65 in the lobby of Le Coq d'Or. I wasn't allowed inside because it was 21 in those days. And Ronnie had a go-go girl on one leg, a go-go girl on another leg, and he was drinking Golden Cadillacs. I come from a beer family going, this looks really good.
What's a Golden Cadillac? I've never heard of that. Do you know a Golden Cadillac?
It's champagne, no?
No, it's like a cream drink or something. It's like creme de cale. I don't know what it is.
But it's booze, right?
Well, yeah, but it's an
adult beverage.
Yeah, Yeah, but it's in one of those fancy little round glasses like that. You're holding up like that, and he's holding court to.
So he's pimp.
Well, you got to understand, Ronnie. I got to know Ronnie really well. When you went and saw him, this was after the band had left him, after Robbie Lane's band had left him. But he always had good bands. He had Crowbar backing him at one point, and Ronnie was a showman. But he was the guy that was in touch with us with real Southern rock. Don't forget, Toronto was not a rock and roll town. It was a R&B town. We grew up on all the R&B stuff, from Stax, all the Bobby Bland stuff, Duke Peacock, VJ Records. That's all the stuff we grew up on. And here was a genuine Southern rocker. And when you went into the clubs, and I'm not making this up, you had millionaires, hookers, statesmen, politicians, rounders, dealers. The song "Life is a Carnival," that the band did, "Life is 2 Bits of Shot," "Hey Buddy," that was Yonge Street at that time. I mean, Yonge Street at that point, where Le Coq d'Or was, you had 5 clubs, 6 clubs along there. You had the Edison with all the country bands where Johnny Cash would play. You had the Steele's Tavern where Gordon Lightfoot was the main act that played there almost every day at noon hour. You had the Colonial, where I'd go down and see Muddy Waters and people like that, and he'd go, young son, come over and sit down. 'Cause, you'd interview him. I was running around. I mean, Cameron was later. I worked for Rolling Stone, like Cameron. Ben Funk Torres was my editor, along with John Scanlon. And there's so many in-jokes in that movie that, I phoned Ben Funk Torres and I said, he gets $1,000. In his dreams, he got $1,000. I said, I did a double feature on Joni Mitchell and got paid $150, including the photograph. For record reviews back then, you used to get $15 to $25. I grew up knowing, and dealing with the Lester Bangs and all the Lester. When I had a radio show in the mid-'70s, I played all the early punk stuff and like that. Lester came on and we did it straight. We did a salute the right-wing music. 2.5 hours of right-wing music, and we did not break character. We did it at the same time. We started off with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, "My eyes have seen the coming of the glory," like that. And we went to the Letter to My Teenage Son by Victor Lundenberg. You asked me what I think of your long hair, son. All I can say from now, this day onward, son, I have no son. We went Letter to Diane, Art Link. We did it all the way straight. The phones are going, and he's going, yeah, well, Elvis is dead. Hell, he died in 1958 when he went in the army. Phones are going like that. And he stayed at my place. We went out and got, of course, roaring drunk the night before. And Lester was the type. What people forget about Lester was, yeah, he was all the things that you read about, but he was also one of the sweetest guys in the world and one hell of a writer. We went out the night before to the Alma Combo to see Dominic Triano play, and we had, John Swenson, a whole bunch of writers that were here, all wanted to, and they knew him, and Bart Testa and people like that that knew him, and he was up at 7 o'clock the next morning, ready to work. I have a massive record collection, like massive, because I collected everything from when I was a kid, and we were downstairs pulling, because he had all the Charlie re-releases coming out, with all the Sun stuff, all that kind of stuff. But that's what you were able to do back. And like, what's really different today is you meet an artist today, it's like maybe backstage for a couple minutes, or you get an interview with them, it's 15, 20 minutes. Hell, I did an interview once with Ry Cooder when he was here for a week. Did the interview at a dump called the Waldorf Astoria on a Sunday night, because they bring them in, they would play a week, right? You know how the week work. Monday night was slow, Tuesday night was slow, Wednesday night would build up, Thursday and Friday, Saturday were incredible. Did the interview with him Monday, because that's the way they did interviews. I got back to my apartment and went, I bet you Ryan is just sitting there doing nothing. I phoned him, what are you doing? Nothing. You want to go have Chinese food? Yeah. So he goes to have Chinese food, and then we went back to my place, and we played Sun Record, all the re-releases that were coming out for hours and hours and hours. And he sent me, when he was working, remember when we did the Hawaiian album that he did with Gabby Pohana? Well, he sent me Gabby's record before he started, playing with the stuff like that. You got to know people. I sat in the room and interviewed Big Mama Thornton, man. And talking about Johnny Ace dying. She wouldn't go out there because, as you know, Johnny Ace, New Year's Eve in the 50s, spun a gun and killed himself. Maybe. It might have been Don Roby, the owner of Duke. She wouldn't talk about it. And people like that. I remember trying to get little Esther Phillips to do an interview at the Colonial. She says, I don't talk to white people. I'm 18, 19 at the time. I said, well, you're going to have a hell of a time getting to the airport, lady. Or you do Maria Muldaur, when she had Midnight at the Oasis, and she's on a French couch like this with her blouse that hung down around here, and she's eating grapes, and you're going, this is a great life. This is, and you went on the road, you knew some of the people. Like I remember seeing Billy Joe in the Hassles. He was in the Hassles. He was in a heavy metal band that most people don't know about either, with John Small, called Attila. They only did one record. And I saw him at the Barge on Long Island years and years and years ago. And so one night Billy calls me here in Toronto, come on down to Buffalo. And I'm going, I'm not coming down to Buffalo to see. We're on for a half an hour. And then he starts telling you like stories they would never tell a reporter. You got to know the artist, you got to know the parents, you got to know. Now, mind you, you weren't exactly writing inside scoops or anything like that at all. I was writing, in the 60s, I wrote for Hit Parader, Circus Cream, Enemy, Zigzag, which was a paper out of there. I was with Jim Dallahan hired me at Hit Parader. Hit Parader was a very, very, very cool magazine. They would do Otis Redding, Steve Cropper, and then they would do like the Magicians and Lothar and the Hand People and stuff. I mentioned Hit Parader to some people, and they go, oh.
Now, did Almost Favorite have it right? Did Cameron have it right when it was like the bands would treat some of the reporters like the enemy and was breaking down that wall of thing?
Maybe by the time Irv Azoff came along, but Irv was always cool with me. No, I never had it as the enemy. The band that he really went out with, which is not there, they kind of said it was kind of a mixture of the Eagles. If it wasn't. He went out with the Allman Brothers. Cameron Crowe and Almost Famous, they show him with the band. It kind of looks like a mix of a couple of bands. I got news for you. That was very mild for what the bands were at that period of time. Who he really went out with was the Allman Brothers. And with the Allman Brothers when Dwayne was still alive. So, it was pretty wild. I worked with the Guess Who in Blood, Sweat, and Tears as doing publicity. And we went out with Charlie Daniels and Wet Willie, which was scary enough in the South. Burton's up there going, these eyes. Charlie Daniels had a record called Be Proud You're a Rebel Because the South's Going to Do It Again. Essentially, like he's in the middle of a thing and there's guns going off. They're out in the parking lot and Burton, these eyes, get off the stage, you assholes. And Charlie, but proud you're a rebel because the South's going to do it again. Particularly if you toured in the South in the 70s, it was a lot wilder than what was shown in that movie. And we didn't have, the bands weren't the enemies. Most of the time you knew the bands. They might say, hey, this is off record. I was out with bands.
And you always respected that, right? Because you wanted to keep them in your trust.
To a large degree. Anne Murray got very uptight with me because I did a tour with her and I wrote about it for Maclean's magazine. She didn't talk to me for 10 years after I did it. I remember we were out with her and we're staying with, the Guess Who at the same time, who I ended up working with the Guess Who later, which was even funnier. And Anne came down in a two-piece and everybody was going, whoa, Anne Murray in a two-piece. And so anyways, prior to that, we'd been out at a place called Bad Manners where a band called Crowbar, who had the song Oh What a Feeling, very big band at the time. And a bunch of us guys coming back in the car, all of us who'd worked with Anne Murray or worked, around her. Her producer was there. Of her radio shows. There was the head of her record company, national promotion. Guys being guys, all in their early 20s, could not think of Anne Murray having breasts. Not one of us. Not one. We got there and it was a cloud. It was like Glenn Campbell having no penis, like before he met Tanya Tucker. It just wasn't there. It was cloud.
He was like a Ken doll?
Yeah, like a Ken doll. So when Larry writes the article for Maclean's national magazine, like Time magazine or
Did you speak of
Newsweek.
yourself in third person?
Yes. So when I write, if you want, when I write the article for Maclean's, I write a phrase that is now in 5 books, been quoted in the New York Times, and the reason Anne Murray did not talk to me for about 10, 15 years. And the phrase, and you got to understand, I was about 22, 23. I wasn't much older. If you spread-eagled Anne Murray naked, certain parts of her come up airbrushed. And her daughter thinks it's hysterical. And even...
Well, there's a quote that'll hold up the test of time.
And basically, when I did the article, Anne was being promoted and everything as the girl next door. Well, if you've been with Anne Murray, she ain't the girl next door. She's a regular lady, a fantastic person, and in those days could drink us all under the table pretty good. She was a hoser, in those days. She was a school teacher. And when you went out with Anne, it was like, she could swear like a trooper, She might not call somebody an asshole, and the Atlantic Canadian vernacular would call them a pie hole. This is our Canadian sweetheart. So when I wrote the article, being 23...
She's the Courtney Love of Canada in the early days. Awesome.
There's
a whole new insight on
yeah. The funny thing about that is they did a TV documentary on her, and her people asked me to be in the documentary. And I thought it was the first in the CBC series. And I went, oh, okay, sure. So I watched it, and it was just... The only outside people were like, other than her family, it was me and Bruce Allen. I went, who the hell put my name up for this? She said, Ann did. I said, that's bizarre. I said, okay. So anyways, when her manager died, Leonard Rambo, we kind of had a moment. And I did also, when she did some of the box sets, I did an article on Billboard. But how the circle sort of is unbroken is Ann's final album is an album called Duets. Ann has a request that, one, I write the notes and I do the bio. Okay, I'm honored because it's like Olivia Newton-John, it's Shelby Lynn, all these people I really, really like. I do it. I get a call. Ann has a couple problems with the notes. Nothing major. Can she call you? Sure. So we get on. And she starts correcting me. She's a former English teacher. Now, some I agreed with, and we went back and forth. But I stopped and I said, you've been waiting 25 years for this. They get this revenge with me. And to her credit, I'm on a committee with her now for Karis would put on the Junos, where we're looking at people that have been overlooked of the year. And at one point, we had to come up with 10 names that have been overlooked in the Junos. She said, oh, gosh, I don't know what to do. I've got 11 names. I stopped and said, Jesus, you're Anne Murray. You can have 11. But you got the difference, I think, with us here in Canada and maybe the United States, not so much maybe today, but certainly one thing at a time, was it was a national family. I mean, I know the regional families in the States, I know the Boston family, the New York. I know the different families and stuff like that, and friends with a lot of those people. Certainly, when I came to Celebrity Access, as I said, to sit down with Larry Maggot or the whole Philadelphia thing, or Don Law scared the daylights out of me till I met him, and then we sat down for 5. Can you imagine doing with a break for lunch? Almost 6-hour interview with Don Law, and he's like a steel trap. I'll tell you a Don Law story that you don't know real quickly. Don Law on his wall has platinum status for an artist. That floored me. Do you know who his father was? Don Law's?
No.
Don Law's father came, he was English, he came to America and ended up working as a talent scout. He actually found Bob Wills, for example. And then he was a talent scout for years later at CBS Records in Nashville. He signed Johnny Cash. He signed Carl Perkins. He signed Johnny Horton, all these different artists.
Wow.
No, it gets better, Don. On the wall is a platinum record, okay, for the greatest blues artist that ever lived. And his father produced Robert Johnson. The 36 Sides of Robert Johnson. I'm looking at, look at the picture. And he said, Larry, I remember the day my dad brought home the lacs of the Robert Johnson sides. We had them in our living room. I'm going, His father sat in the hotel room on 2 sessions where Robert Johnson recorded these tracks. I'm going to leave you with...
Recorded them in a hotel room?
Yeah. But that's all they had back in those. They actually put them in a corner. Now, I'm going to leave you with one last story. It's a story on journalism. Billboard, when I was there, had a 100th anniversary, and they brought a whole bunch of us together. And then about 6 months later, they had all the main editors come in from around the world, including Chet Fleeple, who you would know as the writer who was at Rolling Stone for years and wrote books and Billboard. And we're going around the room. So what's your greatest triumph in your career? And I'm talking about, I interviewed James Brown when I was 14 or 15 years old at the Al McCombel Arena the night the lights went out. Somebody's talking about Berry Gordy used to play me the records before they were released, and that was Adam White. We go around the room. The girls have left. The woman, in the Billboard, we don't do that kind of thing. Chet Fleeple, who's a little bit older than us, goes, well, I've only got one story. I've listened to your other stories. They're all pretty good. I only got one story. 1951, my mom and daddy took me to Fort Worth, Texas, to a nightclub to see Hank Williams play. We're all going, check. Can we get the check over here? Because let me tell you something. In all the things that we do, that's 5 aces. You cannot beat that story.
That's the winner.
You cannot beat that story. Modern day, it might be maybe the night Tupac played the House of Blues, near the end of his life, when he had everybody on stage. Maybe that's a different type of story, but there aren't many stories that can beat that story.
And what a great place to end with a highlight like that. Larry LeBlanc, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us on Promoter 101.
Thank you very much for having me.
Love sitting down with Larry. It was nice to turn the tables on him for a change, as he's always the one asking the questions.
This is John Schultz. Tom Windish.
Charlie from Crescent Ballroom.
Craig Newman.
Dave Brooks.
Dave Chumley here.
Dave Ratner.
John Holiday.
Ted Bicknell.
LX.
Imong Shaw.
Elliot Lefkoe.
Gerald B. Henley. Harlan Fry here.
Jack Ross.
Jason Miller.
Jeffrey Fox. Joe Escalante.
Larry LeBlanc. Martin Atkins.
Neil Dixon.
Nick Farkas.
Paula Palazzo.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101!
Coming up next is the talent buyer for the Boston Callings Festival, Trevor Solomon. Promoter 101, we're excited to have an old friend on the podcast today. Trevor Solomon, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, known you for a long time, but you are the it guy with the cool festivals this year. The lineup for Boston Calling is fucking amazing.
Thanks. It's been fun.
And then Project Pabst is just amazing, too, in Portland. You've got some amazing lineups. Iggy Pop and Beck. Dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, it was awesome. We also do Eaux Claires, which the way it's done, Crashline, who I work for, we produce and book Boston Calling and Eaux Claires. And Project Pabst, we book that, and we work with Musicfest Northwest and the Pabst group to work on that. And, I mean, I have a lot of help. Aaron Desner from the National is one of the curators for Boston. And then Aaron and Justin Verne from Bon Iver, they do everything for Eau Claire, and I just help facilitate getting it done for them.
It would be pretty hard to produce a tour while you're on the back of a bus, but that makes sense.
Yeah, but those guys are every detail. It's awesome. They're fun to work with, and they've been a huge help in me learning, to figure out how to work on these bigger festivals.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, Tool, Mumford & Sons, Chance the Rapper, you're killing it in Boston this year. Sigur Rós, the 1975 Weezer, Major Lazer, Cage the Elephant. Your lineup is stacked, man.
Well, we moved to a new space, so we want to come out swinging, and this will be our first time at Harvard Athletic Campus. It's a bigger capacity for us, and we're growing in size, so we're hoping, when we came out with a lineup, you have a lot of debates, and you're going, all right, hopefully this is a good lineup, and we all felt good about it. We didn't know what the public thought, but personally, all of us felt really strong about our lineup and pretty proud of it.
I honestly think you've got the best headliners on any festival this year. Top
Thanks.
3 lines of your flyer for Boston Calling could be on any Lollapalooza or Oceaga or even Coachella. And I think you guys really nailed it this year and have, without question, the best lineup. It's diverse, a lot of power in the headliners, and yet really artistically cool at the same time.
We tried. I mean, I feel like the cool part is just going to come because Aaron has his flavor in everything. So it's he has certain things that he's really into, be if it's small stuff like Deerhoof or bigger stuff he helped on the Mumford record. So, I mean, that was sort of an obvious choice with us. And then Chance is just, made a killer record. And Tool was, honestly, it's really WME who helped, having the faith in us to do it. And then they were just a good partner and as far as an agency bringing it up early on, and it just worked out.
Well, that's awesome that William Morris and Brannigan able to bring that together for you guys and make that happen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Portland. You guys have really transitioned that festival. Over the years, it's become the Willie Weeks thing and then turned into just a real actual festival. And now it's just real headliners, real show. I mean, Beck and Iggy Pop, man, it's that's hardcore, but you get further down and Spoon, Nas, No Dame, Father John Misty, Die Antwoord, it's an awesome lineup.
Yeah, so what ended up happening was it was Musicfest for years, similar to South by Southwest, where it was various venues, and I was working on that. I left, they went outside to Waterfront Park, which is downtown Portland. And then Project Pabst is also doing a festival in a different location in downtown Portland, and they combined. And then they brought us on last year, and last year sold out both days. First day was Duran Duran and Ice Cube, and the second day was Tim Impala and Ween as your headliners. And it was great, and the fan experience was really good, and people were really into it. And this year, Beck, I think, has a new record coming out, so I think the timing was working out well for us. And then Iggy Pop, I'm a fan, and I worked with Marsha on Cage in Boston. So it was something that was like, it just worked out well to do Iggy in Portland.
So you're talking about Marsha Vlasic, the legendary agent. So Iggy and the Stooges, it's not the Stooges, it's Iggy Pop.
No, it's not the Stooges, it's just Iggy, yeah.
Any way you can get Iggy Pop on stage is a win, and that should be an epic thing. Portland being a pretty historic punk rock community, that'll be a big show.
Yeah, everybody seems psyched on it. It seems to be doing well so far out of the gate, and we're pretty into it. And then Claire, it's pretty cool. Like, the first day we have Chance, Sylvan Esso, Bon Iver is doing a John Prine set with John Prine, playing some of the songs with him. And then on the Saturday we have Wilco, a bunch of Wilco side projects actually on Friday. Feist, Paul Simon, Danny Brown. That's just a really cool thing. The Wisconsin thing is pretty awesome. It's in the middle of a farm in the middle of nowhere. So, I love that.
I think Wilco and Feist just kind of make that lineup.
Yeah,
very cool.
It's cool. And like the Paul Simon thing was something that worked out where there was a relationship. But they're doing a special set with this group, Why Music, which is a cool act at Paradigm Books.
Very cool. Very eclectic. Now, obviously in the summer and weeks to come, you're very busy. All the details, getting things going and balancing the 3 different festivals simultaneously. This is go time for you. But let's talk about the rest of the year. I think people think you guys are like school teachers where you guys work during the summer and then the rest of your year you guys just kick back. But that's not really the case, right? Well, I guess that'd be the inverse of school teachers.
I'm already starting to work on 2018 right now.
Right. Building the lineup, the site, the politics, the red tape, getting everything in place. That's a full year project, right?
Yeah, it's a full year job. It takes a while, send out offers and figure out what people's workload is. It's like, I feel like every year we're trying to move quicker in the cycle and trying to send offers and get bands to confirm like 14, 16 months out. It's probably a year cycle, most likely, with sending offers, getting certain confirmations, and building it up to where most festivals in May announce in January time period, probably right after Coachella announces. So it's like we're probably in go time starting June 1st.
Okay, so there's some R&D and some ideas of what's coming and who might be going out. Imagine you guys talk to all the other big festivals and figure out who they're looking at for headliners too and try and work off of that a little bit.
Yeah, I speak to different festivals. It also, there's certain festivals that are right around us, like Gov Ball, which is a week after us, usually Hangouts a week before us in Alabama. Just really good festivals. And then there's regional people we talk to, like the Oceaga guys we chat with, and then I think it's all over the map. It's like, hey, I like the conversation. I think it's fun. Like Chad at AG, Seattle, I talk to a lot about stuff because, Northwest festivals, stuff like that. And, it's nice to share information.
Yeah, real collaboration kind of vibe. So before the festival days started, you got your start working at the agency group, right?
Yes. Well, I booked the Club EJs in Portland for a little while, and then I worked at the agency group for about a year off and on.
The New York City office, right?
Yeah, being an assistant to assistants, actually. Like, I worked with Steve Martin, actually gave me my job. I worked with Mike Morey, Peter Schwartz, Ken Fermaglish, Steve Call. It was a great office, great people. Rest in peace, Dave Kirby.
Some epic names. So you're guy behind the guy, huh?
Yeah, I was the assistant, but I was literally like getting ticket counts for Creed on their big, massive tour.
Okay, and from there you jumped back to Portland and worked at Thrasher for a while?
Yep. I worked there for off and on for about 8 years, and then I ended up at Musicfest Northwest as their executive producer, where I was there for 9 years, and then got offered the job in Boston working for Crashline, as they had Boston Calling at the time, and then they were starting up Eaux Claires, so they wanted to hire an in-house buyer.
So that's quite the jump around the nation. You got a little taste of everything. Portland to New York to Portland, and off to Boston. It's like a little taste of the whole country there, a little swivel.
Yep, and I have a awesome wife and son, and they are patient people, so it's been a fun ride for the three of us.
It's been fun to watch your son go through from the baby to the crawling and walking process on Facebook. He's very cute.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, he likes it. And now he's excited to go check out Daddy's show, so this will be fun.
The backstage pass mentality. The kids that get to grow up backstage, they have no idea how hard it is to get those opportunities that we had to fight for. It's such a cool thing.
Absolutely.
I'm jealous and envious of your son. It's a very cool thing. So your festivals are coming up. Boston Calling is first, right?
Yep.
Last couple days, you guys have an amazing comedy experience that you guys have added to that too, with guys like Hannibal Buress and Tig and Pete Holmes and Eugene Merman. It's like the comedy alone is worth going for.
Yeah, that was a last-minute thing for us. We were supposed to have a film experience, and that got delayed, and then we switched it up to do comedy, and somebody who we're associated with had a really good relationship with Hannibal. And they brought Hannibal aboard. He's going to be hosting 2 of the 3 nights and then headlining one night. And I really just had to sort of like learn very quickly how to book comedy, which it was interesting, but it was awesome. And I knew Andrew, who works at UTA. I knew him from the Cork agency back in the day. And we were
Andrew Stickney. Yeah, good guy.
Yes. We ended up just chatting for a while, and just he gave me some good insight. And then I was watching Crashing on HBO, and it got me sort of inspired to do Pete. And my wife and I both like Tig. And it's just like, I'm really proud actually of the comedy thing, because I think it worked out really well. And it took a little bit of like finessing, but it really feels like it's going to be a great part of this festival.
It's a very diverse lineup. You did a very good sampling of what's out there. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And there's a lot of interesting comedians out there, so you have a lot to choose from what I realized.
It's amazing, but the different side of the business that I don't think a lot of people understand is in comedy, these guys are people that can write and produce themselves. So they're involved with their own management. Even if there is a manager in place, they can negotiate for themselves. So in music, where it's almost taboo to talk to an artist about business, the comics historically have been very involved with cutting their own deals and just having the agencies like wrap back around once the deals come to play. So it's not an odd thing at all when that comes that way. And it took a little bit of getting used to for me to realize you're allowed to talk numbers and business with the acts directly, because they're really smart guys that have business heads on them, because they're making these world observations. Whereas musicians, they've got people to handle that. Whether they are amazingly intelligent or not, there's different rules that apply across the board with how the industry standard is. You're not supposed to pitch the act directly. It's kind of an interesting thing.
It's funny because I haven't really dealt with many of the comedians directly yet, except for like Hannibal a little bit. And, you know, it's just more just like quick questions and like helping us sort of post stuff on social media and things like that. Like he was really responsive, and everybody's been really cool. And it's interesting. Like I'm still learning the comedy world, but like what I find is that they're really accessible to this being in the music world as well, and sort of combining. And like that's what I like. And they want to sort of intertwine. I think it's really going to be set up really nicely. And where we're doing the comedy is in a hockey arena. And it's not a big hockey arena. I think it's like a 3,000 cap. So it will be actually a really cool, intimate space within the festival itself.
I love that you just called a 3,000 person setting an intimate space for comedy.
When you have a big festival, yeah, that's the one thing I would say. It feels intimate to me, but probably won't be that intimate.
You know, moving on after the festival, if you want to learn more about that diverse world of comedy, a great place to check it out is the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal, where there is no better place to see what's coming on and what's going on. All of the headliners, all the mid-stays, and all the club headliners all in one place at once. It's insane.
That's cool. Yeah, I might have to. It's like I'm learning as I go with this thing.
It's a trial by fire for sure. It's also a little bit like hanging out at the bar. They have the hotel bar where it's all hosted, like being at South by, like being at the Hilton. But walking into the bar is like walking into a dream where every best friend in every movie from the 90s and 80s are all there. And you feel like you know these people because you've seen these movies for years, and, you know, they're on USA and cable in the middle of the night. So you know all of these people, but you've never actually spoken to them. And you finally have that realization when you walk into this room and see every best friend from every movie talking to everyone else's best friend from every other movie. And you realize that you actually don't know any of these people. And it's just so surreal to see them all together, like right there, like 500 of them. And you're just like, oh my God, this is so fucked up. But they're actually really cool people. And if you actually have any appreciation for their set whatsoever, if you've caught any of their set that night and tell them what you actually like in detail, not like, hey, it was a great set, but man, when you did that bit about this, they'll talk to you forever. It's like if they know you actually saw their set and you have details and you have actual feedback, they are usually just game as hell to talk to someone that saw their set and appreciated it, which is really kind of cool.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
Can't recommend that enough in the comedy world when you're getting a taste of it. It's a little overwhelming, but a whole lot of fun. Anyway, what's next for you? What should we be looking for from the world of Boston?
For us, you know, going through this festival will be cool. And the first year in a new space is always, you know, unique, but I think it's going to be great. I think the layout is killer, and I think people are going to be really psyched on the experience. And like, I went to a Harvard Yale game, and it was amazing, actually. Like, it was unbelievable. And, like, just the vibe of the Harvard Yale game when I went there, and, like, the energy, and it just feels like when we do the festival on that site, it's going to be similar. And then after that, like, hopefully coming up with a killer 2018 lineup that everybody's psyched on.
That's awesome. The idea of you at a Harvard Yale game is the last thing I would ever like picture in my head after knowing you for.
It was awesome. It was fun, actually. I was sort of shocked again. They gave us tickets and we went, and it was a cool experience. Like this at the time, the Secretary of State John Kerry, I think, was there, which I didn't see him, but I saw Morning Joe walking by, which I thought was cool, and I was like perplexed by just like the experience, but like, you know, me and my family get to know Boston. We're learning it day by day, but like that area, which isn't actually Cambridge, funny enough, it's actually on the Boston side where the stadium and where Harvard Athletic Complex is. It's a cool area, Austin, and like it's just a nice area, and it's just something we're excited to check out.
That's amazing. I have this vision of you just fully getting immersed with the whole campus vibe and starting to row crew.
Not there yet, no. I'm taking it slow by slow. I need to still buy a Harvard sweatshirt, but like we're getting there.
Awesome. Love it. Trevor, thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us, and congratulations on your amazing lineups this year. You really outdid yourself.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, and congrats on Promoter 101 and all the successful shows you guys are doing.
I appreciate it, man.
All right, take care.
Trevor absolutely killed it this year with Boston Calling's lineup. He's making a serious dent in Wisconsin, Boston, and Portland music businesses.
My name is Reese Reinsteimer, and you can watch my daddy on Promoter 101.
I'm always sad to see us coming to the end of the podcast, but that's okay. We'll be back next week with more.
In the weeks to follow, our guests will include Ted Cohen, Stuart Galbraith, Errol Hyatt, Steve Riff, Phil Rodriguez, Jeff Cohen, Sean Edison, Brian Ziss, Paula Palazzo, Chuck Randall, Rob Ziffarelli, and so many more.
If you have any thoughts or feedback about the podcast, we'd love to hear about you. Send us an email to steiny@promoter101.net.
Keep up with us on Twitter. I'm at W. Luke Pierce, Dan's at The Jew, and the show is at Promoters 101.
Be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you podcast, and please help us spread the word by telling all of your friends and a couple of your enemies and your ex-girlfriends and your kids, like everyone.
If you missed any of the past podcasts, you can always catch up at Promoter101.net.
Past guests include Tom Ross, Mark Geiger, Tom Windish, Andrew Druskin, Steve Strange, Jamie Loeb, and Lee Anderson.
I'm Luke Pierce, and for Steiny, we'll catch you next week.
Hey, it's Mark David, Steve Strange, Toby Leighton Pope, Stuart Galbraith, Simeon Galperin, I'm Ralph James, Ted Cohen,
Julia Frank,
Jeff Goodman, Jamie Adler, and Frank Wing, Doug Edley, David Kleiner, Stephen Riff,
Tom Chauncey,
and we're on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Ba-da-ba-ba.